Great. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Voices of Nature author series from Biomimicry for Social Innovation. My name is Toby Hertzlick, and today I'm accompanied by Jamie Figueroa, dear friend and beautiful, beloved author. Say hi, Jamie, so people can see you.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see all of you. Great to be here. Thank you, Toby.
Welcome, Jamie. Well, I and Jamie actually are hosting you here from Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is the traditional and ongoing lands of the Tiwa and Tewa Pueblo peoples. I want to start by acknowledging that and invite all of you, wherever you are in your own heart, in your own mind, if you know, to just make note of and give gratitude for the land on where your feet are and the people who have stewarded that and protected it and on whose land we sit now. It's an important practice to be remembering and acknowledging that history, those first peoples, and all the non-humans who are on the lands with us today. So welcome. I am the founder of Biomimicry for Social Innovation. I see a lot of familiar faces on this Zoom, so most of you probably know about this. We are a platform and a gathering place for people who are interested in applying nature's intelligence to social change and to leadership and to how we craft the evolutionary culture of our world. Jamie is our guest. If I encourage you to pin her on your first screen. And in fact, Jennifer, maybe you can pin us both. That way people can see Jamie and I in conversation with each other. Just to tell you a little bit about Jamie. Jamie Figueroa is a writer and a storyteller. She's also the assistant professor of creative writing at IAIA, where she also received her Master's of Fine Arts. I know Jamie is a deep lover of the natural world. Jamie's a mother, a sister, a friend, a partner, and really something of an explorer in this wild mind of writing. We're also personal friends. Jamie and I spent 8 days and 84 miles on the Green River together a couple of years ago, and we've shared many spaces, including my guest room during part of this writing process. So it's really a huge honor, Jamie, for me to have you in this space. You're also an alumna of the Living Systems Leadership Retreat that BSI offers, and I know that many people who are in this network are curious about that too. So in fact, Jen, maybe you could put Jamie's bio in the chat. So if people are interested in seeing a little bit more about Jamie, they can link to that. I've been speaking to Jennifer Gardner. Those of you in this community are aware of Jennifer as our tech support and heart support and backup for these sessions. So if you have any technical problems, if you have anything you need to know about the logistics of what we're doing, you could private message Jennifer in the chat and she will take care of you. So our purpose today is to introduce Jamie's book, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer, to the world, and get it out there to audiences who will benefit from this book. This is a different kind of circle for Jamie to be in. She spends a lot of time in literary circles, and this is a kind of more of a biomimicry circle. So this is a new community, and that's a big part of what we're doing here, is trying to cross-pollinate communities around really important books that are hitting the market. One of the things I've learned is that it takes a village to market a book. It takes an exceptional human to author a book like this, any book, but especially a book like this that helps us, invites us to travel different dimensions and different worlds together. And it takes all of us coming together to help get a work like this out into the world. So the purpose of this Voices of Nature author series is to help amazing women who are bringing forward books that speak to the natural world and how we relate to the natural world and how we are informed by and can be informing nature. So that's what we're here to do today. And this is in partnership with Women Leading Change and partially funded by the Novo Foundation. Jamie, what would you say about why we're here? Anything else you want to add? Anything? Why did you say yes?
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I'm so very grateful. You know, it takes actually a village to support the writer while she writes the book, and so we're in community the whole way through and continue to be. And so feeling exceptionally grateful for you and all that you do. and this community of folks, and to be here today. So thank you to all of you. I said yes today because writing for me and stories are so multidimensional, right? And they very much include um, the deep presence that we bring to our own lives, the relationship that we have with the unseen world. I have a very dear friend who's of the Anishinaabe tradition, and she talks about how um, natural and supernatural, it's all part of the natural world, right? And so that very much influences the way in which I write, my writing practice, what I write about, and how it lands on the page as well. Um, in addition to that, it's such an honor to be with folks who are looking to nature not to excavate resource, but to be deeply inspired and reminded of the importance of being in relationship, right? Um,
Thank
and
you.
so continuing to learn from all of you, and feeling right at home in the spaciousness and the wholeness, um, and the rightness of looking to ourselves as extensions of nature, and um, to be in right relationship with ourselves and with nature, um, is is an exceptional place to be. And I want to follow you like a school of fish. I just want to follow all of you around. I want to be in the pod with you, moving through the world.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Jamie. And I appreciate you saying that as you're seeing folks here. We purposefully set these Voices of Nature conversations up as a conversation and as a Zoom where you get to see the faces of people who are out there. So if you want to see who's there, Jamie and others, put yourself in gallery view and scan and see who's there. If you want to just see Jamie and me, put yourselves in speaker view. We will leave some time at the end for some dialogue, some Q&A. And you'll see my eyes go around because I try to follow the chat and what people are asking there. I can't always do it, but I try to follow your questions in the chat as well. So this is a dialogue, but most of our attention is going to be on dear Jamie. So my friend, Jamie, let's start with talking a little bit about you and who you are, because people are curious. Who you are as a person, who you are as a writer.
Well, let's just hope this woman, they send me something.
Yeah.
Just
And I'm going to ask folks maybe to mute yourself while we're in the conversation with Jamie, and then we'll open up mics later. So Jamie, your family, you and your family have roots in the Afro-Caribbean and Taino indigenous peoples of Boriquen, which some people know as the island of Puerto Rico. So you have Boricua, do I say that correctly?
Boricua, yes.
Boricua heritage
Yes.
by way of Ohio.
By way of Ohio.
Tell us how that informs who you are and who you are as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've been spending most of my life in this deep active recovery from what was systematically erased and repressed from much of my family through the generations of colonization, right? So there's that, the island of Puerto Rico being property of the United States, not actually a state, right? And there's lots of conversation about that now, but what that entails, right? Also being having family that's from a place where people go to have an experience, to sort of be on vacation, right? To live a different experience of themselves, and not always necessarily to come into contact with the deep presences, especially of history that are ongoing there. And so, for me growing up in rural central Ohio for much of my youth, my allies were forests and being in the garden. And I remember the first time digging up potatoes in the rich, luxurious soil of Ohio that had been tended to, right? And picking up toads as a child, and just having a full body sensory experience of being outside. being one of those children who, left in the morning and came back in the evening after a day exploring outside, when we could do that, right? And we're allowed to do such things. And that was sort of more of the world of our experience. And, taking walks through county roads, and especially in the winter when the fields were fallow, to just see the vast horizon, and to have a sense of spaciousness and sky. And so growing up feeling quite dislocated as one of the only children of color in many of the small towns that I grew up in, with a mother who was heavily assimilated, who very much wanted me to blend and survive the very best that she could provide for me. Met this kind of, being on the outside of, being sort of looked at as suspect and other, being continuously asked, what are you, where are you from, even though I was, coming from the same place that the people who were asking me were, originated. And so that set up this strange sort of fracturing, I would say, as a young person, and always at the edges observing, right? And then finding deep refuge and solace in nature, and in the imagination and in creativity. And those things all go together for me: the natural world, creativity, and the expression of the imagination, and the deep nourishment of the soul. And so, it's a matter of needing to know our particular coordinates, our particular identity, and that expression in this life, and then moving through that specificity into a universal human experience, right? And so also those two things go together. The more in which I understand myself, my family, where I'm from, where my family is from, those generational stories and generational trauma, the more specificity I have around that, the more I'm actually able to move into a larger experience of feeling related and connected to a human family that is incredibly complex and diverse. And beyond that, into a larger family, like Mary Oliver talks about, of belonging, of being life and belonging to life. So that's some of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Belonging to life. That is very much where I experience your writing comes from, belonging to life as a whole. I want to actually, we're here to promote your book, but in terms of your writing, I'd like to start with the essay, your recent essay in Catapult magazine. And for those who don't know, Catapult is an online literary magazine and also kind of a watering hole for writers and aspiring writers, and there's workshops and things like that. And we are going to send this this article out to you with the recording. Jen, maybe you can put the link in the chat in case people want to have that right at their fingertips. But this was an essay about the writer's life as an ecosystem. Do you mind if I read a little bit of the beginning?
Please do. Please do.
And then you can comment a little bit about that. So I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs. This is Jamie Figueroa's writing. The writer's life as an ecosystem. Recently on Instagram, I spotted a photograph of a former writing mentor, now dear friend, posing in the Catskill Mountains. The surrounding trees dwarfed her. She was a small face, a tiny smile, bundled up and beaming from within the cathedral of a forest. It seemed a sacred habitat, and there was something so right about seeing her there, as if the roots, trunks, and branches were aware of her very breath and the weight of her petite frame in their midst. It reminded me of a time nearly a decade ago when I was on my family's homeland, the island of Boriken. Deep in the mangroves, near an inlet of river where we pulled off the swirling road to rest and stretch, was a sign that read, "Tu eres naturaleza." You are nature. Not you come from nature, or you're related to nature, or once you were nature, but rather you are nature. This declaration followed me through my MFA program years later, when in a low residency program, I began to notice what helped and supported my writing versus what hindered it and made me forget who exactly I was. It goes on to talk about Jamie's understanding of her life as an ecosystem. Tell us more about that. How is your creativity connected to the natural world as a resource?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about the word nourishment, right, as you were speaking. And I was thinking about also um, the cycles of creativity that we have as artists and creatives and writers, and the way in which certain circles, especially if we find ourselves in more limited circles, you know, artist circles or literary circles, writing circles, um, how feels like there's a real divorce from uh, life force, right? And then the way in which we are compromised because of that, right? Um, the lack of connection leads to a lack in our ability to be inspired and to create. And I was watching, you know, what happens in the wake of that in some circles. Well, there can be some destruction, and there can, right, of the self, right? People want to feel better and sort of anesthetize, um, and I think about also the long tradition in literature around going to the bar after a reading, right? And staying at the bar for hours and hours and hours and hours, which is not a commentary on drinking or not drinking, but it's that it just felt like, can we go to the woods? Like, can we go to the woods or to the river after a reading and really be with the poetry, right? The poetry that is present and always present in nature. I'm thinking of a longtime mentor, Natalie Goldberg, who I've studied with for over 20 years. And she says something to us constantly, which is, you know, the world is waiting for you to notice it. It's constantly offering itself up to you, right? And so there's that, you know, how could we have writer's block, right? Or how could we be at a loss in the relationship with our creativity? And again, it's all about relationship, right? I feel like I'm constantly saying this when I do readings. It's how do we be in relationship with ourselves, in relationship with our creativity, and the expression of that, and realize that that expression is having a relationship with us. And what better place to look than the natural world to consider how relating works, right? And also how cycles work. And so there's just so much sanity to be found there. And for me, something clicked into place when I was taking a walk at the end of my graduate studies, and sort of in a high overlook here in Santa Fe, and could see all of the texture and the shapes of the landscape. And I just realized that I was able to, I was going to say the word produce, and then I was like, oh, I want a better word than that, generate. I was able to generate with a lot of strength. And I felt really present and vital in that moment. And I realized, sort of went through the list of aspects in my life in my mind, and I realized that they all were sort of in harmony, and they all were in a place where they were really nourishing and supporting me. And in that place, I was just, you know, I felt like I had 100 million stories to tell, and I wouldn't live enough lifetimes to tell them all. And, you know, what a powerful place to sort of be. And that was, and then I realized, oh, all of these things are interrelated. Oh, what else is interrelated? I'm thinking about my life as this ecosystem. Conversations that I have, the people in my life, how I look to myself, treat myself, what do I say to myself, how do I feed myself, how do I, all of this was sort of swirling about me. And like I said, it was this way of being in harmony, and it worked so much better for me than trying to silo myself or compartmentalize my creativity or my expression as a writer. What I actually needed to do was come into a holistic sense of myself and myself being in the world, and look to nature to guide me as to how to do that in a way that could really be the best expression. Again, I was going to say successful, and I was like, there's these certain key words, right? That in sort of a capitalistic mindset, which I feel like is the antithesis of appreciating nature, that I'm watching myself try to choose differently as I'm talking to you all, and it's a great it's a great challenge.
This is a writer's mind at work. Words come and they audition themselves. You want to say this one? No, no, not quite that one. I was talking about something else, actually. And your choice of words, one of the things that when, for folks, when you purchase this book and when you read this book, one of the things that I think may stand out is just how Jamie's choice of words and the way she crafts sentences, and each word is full and rich, and you can feel how well chosen it is. There's a level of detail that just kind of stops me in my tracks and has me savor each one. And I hear and feel you doing that now.
Thank you.
I'm curious about, are most writers that you interact with, the literary circles that you hang out with, do they respond to this point of view, this being sourced by nature, going to the river rather than the bar after the reading, or is this kind of an unusual thing?
I would say it's a bit of an unusual thing. I would say just, and I don't think that makes me special. Let me just say that, right? I think it just sort of feels like it sort of keeps me on the edges, which is a place that I'm familiar with. It's a place that I gain a lot of perspective from. And I think that's also something that ties into my work, is the multiplicity of perspective, right? And from outside of the center, right, from the fringe of dominant culture, you can sort of see how things are working for better and for worse. And for most of the book, it's for worse in a way that is, I think, asking readers to increase awareness or challenge awareness with readers, but sort of going back to your original question, Toby. Yeah, I just lost my train of thought. We were talking about this before. I just had my second COVID vaccine shot. I was like, it's highly likely I'm just going to talk about spaciousness. A moment will enter.
Well, maybe that's a moment to pose another question.
my sweet nervous system, right? Just sort of hold myself, but being on the fringes, right? So I think as a woman of color, as a woman of mixed heritage, already that puts me on the sort of the external sides of literary circles, and the voices that are often privileged, right? And then to say from that place, I'm not actually going to speak to you the way that you've been speaking to me, right? That actually doesn't work most of the time. So I'm going to challenge the way in which narrative has been presented. I'm going to challenge the aspects of writing and craft and how they have been presented. What point of view can do or can't do, I need to challenge that, right? So I've gotten used to coming from this place that is on the fringe or speaking back to. And now I sort of have taken it on as it's sort of my process and my practice of decolonizing my imagination and my relationships, the relationship I have with my own identity, the relationship that I have with place. And when I'm with all of you and when I'm with beloved Toby, there is such a rightness and a saneness, right? Because we deeply need to feel a sense of meaning and belonging. Yeah. And that absolutely comes when we're connected to the natural world, right? When
we were speaking the other day, you said something about, in this book, one of the things that you're doing is going beyond privileging a dominant human perspective. And there are characters in the book that are not human, so you're taking, even from a character point of view, you're going beyond the dominant human perspective. And I think that when I hear you talking about nature, bringing nature in as source, we also spoke about this, that many of us now are reckoning with white supremacy, and can we move past and beyond white supremacy? And some of us in the biomimicry world talk about, yes, and what about beyond human supremacy? Can we be humble in the face of all of the other characters, all of the other creatures, all of the other sources of wisdom on this planet? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to become aware of when we do that, right? When we include diversity of perspective in the human species realm, we become fuller, more nourished, more connected. It benefits all of us. And when we take that beyond to the natural world, the same thing happens, right? I'm thinking about the Haudenosaunee people and my partner, and I'm thinking about the Thanksgiving address. And I don't know how many of you have had the honor of being with such a prayer. But literally every aspect of the natural world and beyond is accounted for, appreciated, and thanked. At the end of that prayer, no matter how short the version is or how long, you cannot walk away from that experience not feeling a sense of integral belonging and appreciation and gratitude. And it, for me, it literally feels like the wellspring, right? The wellspring. And so to create from there and to consider what kind of stories to tell and how to tell them, right? Is really powerful.
Yeah. I had the good fortune of being with Randall, hearing the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving prayer through Randall. As he described that sometimes with his traditional people, it might go on for a few days. It was a good long prayer when I heard it, probably about 30, 40 minutes. But I remember this refrain after every acknowledgement of different aspects of the natural world and the non-human world and the human world. There's a line that says, "And now our minds are one."
Totally.
And
totally.
it's just so,
It's
that sense of reconnection that you're talking about, the reconnection with the natural world, the reconnection with all that we belong to, that we sometimes forget.
absolutely. And so those are the underpinnings of this book.
Yeah.
Right. If you sort of excavate and you go through the layers of the narrators being the sense of place, right? The language that's used, the events that happen, it's all pointing to that place of being in relationship and reverence, right? You might not get that at first, which is why I'm telling you, right? Because the voice is strong and it needed to be strong, right? But I'm telling you that as sort of the author of the work. And I think once you get through the book, you'll have that experience. I hope you have that experience.
This novel, let's go back to the novel, and you can see it on your screen too, Brother, Sister, Mother, Explorer. It's not actually about nature, but it is about relationship. It is about place. It is about this oneness. And one of the things I want to lift up is that it embodies some of the central core practices of biomimicry. We've been talking a lot about reconnection, which is one of the fundamental pieces of biomimicry. We talk about ethos, which we've also been talking about why we do this work. We talk about emulate a lot in biomimicry, mimicking the natural world. And we talk about reconnection with the natural world. There's also a piece that I want to lift up about a big part of biomimicry are the practices of seeing nature in a different way, of building relationship with nature in a different way, of having, of quieting our human cleverness. And your prose has these astounding, really astonishing level of details of observation that I find, as I was reading it, I thought to myself, this is like a masterclass in biomimicry. Even though the observation might not be about a bug's eye or the unfurling of a fern, while that's definitely there in the background, that quality of challenging people to wake, excuse me, wake up and pay attention at a different level. In talking about your book, you said it continues to undo privileged perspectives and foreground what has been overlooked. Wondering if you can speak a little bit about your practice in that regard.
Yeah, I'm still on the bug's eye and the fern. I'm like, oh, I'm leaning forward, right? This sort of the poetry in that, which is why I love hanging around Toby. One of the many reasons why is because there's all this poetry that's activated. Yeah, being able to slow down. I think also being, studying again with Nellie Goldberg for 20 some years throughout finishing my undergraduate and my graduate work as an MFA student, are the Buddhist principles, right? Slow walking, meditation, and writing. Those are the three things that we would do together. And so slow walking, right? And feeling one's feet on the earth, which is always trying to rise up through us, right? Also has impact on the way that we think, the way that I think, the way that I imagine and create. So that quality of receptivity, and I love finding shells and rocks in nature that sort of have this cupping expression, and thinking about ourselves. And oftentimes I'll talk about this with my students as well. Sometimes as writers and artists, we're sort of in this pose, right? We're trying to catch it, we're trying to make it happen, right? And it's very much about the efforting and the doing and the manifesting, which is wonderful and great for sure. But there's another pose, which is a lot less efforting and works just as well, sometimes better. And that is to slow down and become quiet and receptive and soft, and to think about making that shape with your presence, and also listening with our inner ear. I feel like nature also has that really great example of how do we listen with our inner ear, see with our inner eye, and rooting oneself there and creating from there is sustainable, right? That's another thing. How do we think about ourselves as artists and creatives that last for decades? Not the one book or the one show or the one, right? But this is the long experience. This is a lifelong experience. And so to be sustainable and to be nourished, yeah.
One of the very first conversations I had with Janine Benyus, who many in this community know, we were talking about interacting with nature, and she said, I want you to listen without hunting for the next sound. And that reminds me of what you're talking about writing.
Yeah.
So perhaps the practice of writing and the practice of being a biomimic and a student of nature are really very, very closely aligned. I think they may be.
I think they are. That's what makes me really happy to be here. That's what makes me really happy to be here. And also, Toby, I'm thinking about times when I was writing the book and I would try to force sort of my will on these characters that had their own will in mind. And that the book would not move forward. And it was incredibly challenging. And so I found myself, again, trying to force and make happen with this idea that I had, and then having to soften and listen and wait and trust. And when each time I did that, I would be surprised, I would be led, right? So this is absolutely part of the writing experience for me, just as much as knowing how to write dialogue and knowing how to, pay attention to detail and how to make a sentence, a line of poetry, right? Is also these qualities of attunement.
That's right.
Yeah.
In biomimicry, one of the fundamental practices is, we call them eyesights. There's all kinds of different forms for them and all kinds of different instructions, but essentially what it is go sit outside quietly for at least 20 minutes without an agenda, and let the natural world come to you. Be open, be observant, pay attention to the detail. How can you connect? What can you learn? And Jamie, when we were talking the other day, you said to me, I wrote it down, biomimicry points to the natural world to inform how we can be human at our best capacity. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I want to point to what you just mentioned, right? When we don't have an agenda, when we meet someone who is different from us, and we listen in a way that's unique to that moment and to that person, underneath all of the levels of naming that we have, right? What's there is a presence to presence connection and relating and respecting and honoring, right? And so I feel like also some of what's happening right now, which feels like difficult and important restorative justice work to actually see each other and appreciate each other, is being able to go through this process of excavation and winnowing down, and being able to quiet and experience, and to have a practice of that, and to feel centered and safe in that. And so do it with the plum tree in your backyard, right? Do it with the sagebrush. Do it in ways, and then grow that, perhaps, right? That's my hope, right? And that's also in writing the book, is that we can see and experience each other more fully. Yeah.
And generate that sense of belonging. I love
Generate that sense of belonging. Absolutely. And one of the things that I learned in writing this book that you absolutely helped with, Toby, because you were one of my refuges, was that we have home in each other, right? So one of the great things about writing this book especially is that as long as that I held to it, right, like a tether, it would not lead me, it would not let my life go astray, right? It kept me contained to complete it, right? And there were situations I found myself in, or choices that I would make, and I would be going the wrong direction, and it would pull me back, right? Or I would choose to be in relationship with it, and it would pull me back. And so one of those times of leaving Santa Fe briefly and then coming back and being around you a lot was, and many other people, was finding that sense of home in each other.
That's right.
Right. I experienced that through the writing of this book. So there were many gifts that the work provided, the process of writing it provided. Yeah.
I'm just remembering, do you mind if I share a little bit about this story?
No.
We weren't even that close at the time when this happened. We were sort of new friends. I had kind of a friend crush on you, but you were leaving town and you were going off to start a PhD program that was very ill-fated. And one of those, but the book would not let you go from the book. And I remember I think it was a birthday of mine or something. And we talked on the phone and I was joking and saying, oh yeah, we're having a little birthday gathering. Why don't you come over? Knowing you were off in distant PhD land. And you said, well, actually I'm here and all my stuff is in my car. So you did come over, and the next thing we knew, you had moved into the guest room and spent a few months there focusing on the book. Yeah. And I knew that there was this immense creative process going on the other side of my house that forged our friendship and resulted in this incredible work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It essential, and green tar there watching over it all, in the garden, right? And this language all about, and of connectivity, of connection as a way of honoring life, right? Yeah. Not connection looking with agenda, right? That leads us to this place of being extractive, and also challenging our own relationship with our creativity, right? Sort of looking at things that inspire us, and work that we're doing as sort of, what are you going to do for me, right? How are you going to become a product that I can take to the marketplace? But instead, finding that sense of home and relationship with the process.
Mhm.
And again, that's sustainable. That means that you might write things that don't make it into the public sector, that you don't share, that are for other purposes, right? Um, and I think that that can grow us. That can grow us in a sense of real and true strength and durability, you know. And then the book comes out, right? And you have this experience and you do readings and there's reviews and there's all of this. People like it and get excited and all of that, and it's fine. And also while it's happening, it's like wind blowing, you know? You just are highly aware that the wind is going to die down, that it's moving through, and what's left, right? What's left are your feet on the ground and the ever present gifting that the earth gives us, right?
Mhm.
Of taking such incredible care of us, regardless of how we behave. Which again takes me back to the prayer of thanksgiving, to this, you know, times in the prayer of apologizing. You know, we don't treat you as well as we could treat you. You know, we don't honor you in the ways that we could honor you, ants, you know, and still we send our love and we send our thanks and appreciation, and we know that you're doing very hard work for us, right? And now our minds are one. It's like that is what there is to hold on to. So, you know, you have an experience and it seems very exciting, right? And then come back to the ground of being, and that is direct contact
Mm.
with the
Mm.
natural world, right?
Mm. Thank you. Well, this is a gust. I'm making another plug for the book. This is a gust of wind. The winds will die down, but not yet. Great review in the New York Times. It's an astounding book. This book will take you places. It's not always easy. It's very deep. It's very emotional, deeply connected with these characters. Let me just check the time here. We have about 12 minutes, and I do want to leave some time for others' questions, but I have a couple more questions for you. So I'm going to, maybe you can just touch on them. One person who I know is in the biomimicry community, Alex, really wanted to join us today or watch the recording because she's so curious about character development for nonfiction. And your characters are so strong and they are so themselves. And as a writer who is so sourced in this vastness of belonging and in the essence of the present moment, tell us just a little bit about your process and experience of then bringing that into the form of individual characters.
Yeah, it's all about complexity, right? It's about complexity, and that that the character who the brother and the sister that the book revolves around, especially the sister Rafina, that she's also deeply flawed, right? That we root for her, and she's essentially our hero or a shiro, right? When we think about how narrative works in fiction. But that she also goes against our expectations, right? The same is true for folks in the book who are the tourists who pass through the town, and who the story also includes. There were times in rendering those characters on the page where I had simply made caricatures, and that doesn't work. Even though at times I was frustrated with that, you know, that archetype of outsider coming in and passing through and having all sorts of influence and impact. And I had to come back to my inner listening and my quiet. And so has to be a multidimensionality. So even though the characters who do the worst in the novel, we have to feel a sense of compassion for them and understand why they're doing what they're doing. That doesn't mean permission. That doesn't mean necessarily forgiveness, but it means that it's calling upon a sense of understanding and compassion. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. One more question for you. You participated in the very first offering of Living Systems Leadership, a workshop, a retreat that Biomimicry for Social Innovation puts on. And you came to the first one in New Mexico. while you were in the process of writing this book, and at that workshop, it's a workshop for women and those who identify as women, and we go deeply into practices from the natural world that you can then apply to your own leadership or your own work in the world. And I'm just wondering what that was like for you to be part of that workshop, if it did or didn't influence your experience with your book, just what it's left you with now, 3 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think I went in trying to figure out, because leadership felt so large, right? Like all caps, bolded, underlined. And I was like, here I go. I'm gonna really figure out how to do leadership right. Right. And what happened was the connection and relationship, right? The impact of women being together um, in nature um, and receptive is a kind of holiness. It's a kind of divinity. It's a sacred space. And so I had thoughts about how it might be useful to me. I had taken 2 new jobs and I was thinking, oh, they're so important. I'm going to figure this out. And the jobs I chose to leave them, and other things in my life rose up. Right. And as you were talking about that experience, Toby, I was like, the stars. Because I ended up camping that week and I was just like, the stars, right? And lying on the ground and feeling the breath of that place, which sounds like a metaphor, which sounds like poetry. But I'm telling you that my experience was that of literally and physically feeling the breath of that place. Right. And so, and all of the exercises that we were led through, and not knowing necessarily at the beginning of an exercise where we were going, and coming through an exercise and feeling more seeds of transformation being planted, right? And that we were all together, sort of weathering different storms that came up, right? Because of the dynamics of a group, and bending to that, and finding new expression in that was spacious and respectful and receptive, right? And so it was many of the things that we were learning and exploring, and the exercises we were experiencing were living themselves out in real time all around us, right? And also in the way that we were experiencing ourselves and each other. So it was just this rippling, this exquisite rippling, and feeling held, such tremendous facilitating, just like top of the line, really exquisite.
Thank you. And I give much credit to Rachel Bagby and Karen Allen as my co-hosts in that. Thank you for saying that. And friends, we are fingers crossed, hoping, COVID permitting, that we will be offering that workshop again in September. So you'll be hearing more about that this year. We actually come together on the land, perhaps this year. So thank you, Jamie. Thank you for that beautiful review.
Yeah.
I want to read one more piece from your essay, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions from the group. So if you have a question, please be ready to go into participants and put your hand up by your name, or we can do it visually. But I just want to read this one last piece that I think maybe is the closing of your essay. Still, what is true for trees is true for humans too. We are heliocentric. No matter how we are bent into shapes that do not serve us, our living cells know to move toward the light of the sun, and this enables us to survive. When we return to nature, to ourselves, and are receptive, listening with our inner ear, the same inner ear that listens for the lines of the essay trying to germinate, or the character whispering to us, or the rhythm of the poem fluttering. What awaits is our own unique knowing of the habitat of our own ecosystem that supports and sustains the flourishing of our lives, both on and off the page. Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you, Toby, who is also makes an appearance in that essay. Rightfully so.
I was, yes, I did. Thank you. So we just have a few minutes, and sometimes we hang out for conversation for a while after. I think Jamie has a little bit extra time. If others do too, we will formally close at the top of the hour. And I think Jennifer just put up again in the chat the link for the book, which is published by Catapult. And the essay is from the Catapult magazine. So there's a deep sense of belonging there. So I'm wondering, good people in Zoom land, does anybody have a question or a comment or something that you would like to ask Jamie? Ani, good to see you. Can you unmute yourself, please? You need to unmute your microphone. Great.
There. Okay, good. Yeah. How did you arrive at the title of your book? Could you unpack the title of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also deeply influenced by myth and archetypes and psychology. I'm drawn to these titles that we have, especially within the family, and the private versus public. So the ways in which we come to know ourselves within the structure of the family, and how that moves out into the external world and still has its influence. The title sort of suggests quite strongly that it's the relationships, right, between these people, the brother and the sister and the mother and the explorer, that's going to drive this work. So much so that even at times the mother's name is Rosalinda, but very often we just call her the mother, right? And so then we start to think of the mother and all that means or can mean. And in this case, what we hope it means and what it doesn't mean, actually. And then we begin to sort of I hope we begin to come up against our ideas of a particular role versus the lived reality of that role, right? And there's inherent conflict in that. And so I think conflict, story, those things sort of go together, right? Conflict, character, story. Now you get those things brewing, and you can have someone paying attention to you, right? And you can have the possibility of the invitation for some transformation, right? Through the ways in which a story can work on us. I'm thinking about Martin Shaw, the mythologist, who says, let the story have its way with you, right? You don't have to figure out every single thing that it means, but there's a spirit of the story, and so let it have its way with you. And sort of in that vein of mythology and archetypes and the family, that's how I leaned towards that title.
I want to understand better. So what's the relationship of explorer with the brother, sister, mother, family constellation thing? I mean, expand.
Beautiful question. Yeah, it's perfect question.
You may have to read the book, Ani, and when you read, you will certainly find out very, very quickly. I'll let Jamie speak to this.
Right, you would think that like father, right? Father would be that line, right? Or husband would be that line, right? You would sort of think that if we're going along in that way, almost like
I like that you didn't.
Almost like a riddle, right? And then you get to the end, and it goes against your expectation. And so that also gives you a little bit of insight into how the book works, is that it's constantly challenging expectations of what you think should come next, right? And getting out of the should kind of mentality to be more vulnerable and more sincere and authentic, right?
And there's something kind of poetic too about the brother, sister, mother, explorer. I'm going to take just a pause here because I do want to acknowledge that it is the top of the hour. I know many people have busy lives and need to move on to the next thing. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this. Thank you for clearing an hour of your day for this conversation and this circle. Thank you to those in Zoom land who will be watching later in Zoom recording land. We're just so grateful that people come and continue to show up and be part of this belonging, this sense of community. Thank you. And if anybody does want to stay for more informal conversation, I think we can keep this line open for another 10, 15 minutes and just see what emerges. I will stop the recording now. Do continue. Please keep coming.